One of the goals I had when I started this channel was to be very, very transparent about my journey as a writer, and where I started, how I got to the point that I'm at, what progress am I making, and so on. Everyone comes from different walks of life. They have come from different circumstances, so you don't know how someone's story could affect someone else. And today's video is going to be a summary of what has happened in the past couple of years, because I'm in my 30s, and it's only been in the past couple of years that I've actually seriously started considering, well, not considering, oh my gosh, words, that I seriously buckled down and actually went ahead and started trying to make my desire to be a writer a reality. It's something I've always wanted in some capacity, but I had some, I guess you could say, mental obstacles getting in the way. So let's backtrack a little bit to November of 2018, okay? So I was 32 at the time, was going to turn 33 in a couple of months from then. I'm 34 now. And something clicked up here in my head where I'm like, okay, I like my retail job. I mean, I really do, don't get me wrong. My bosses are great, my coworkers are great. I don't have any problems at the job. I never have. I'm a very lucky person in that regard. But it really clicked at that point in time that I did not want to be stuck in retail, like, until retirement or beyond. And even not probably within the next decade or so. So I've started making a conscious effort to try and find other ways to get a job or make a business for myself. This is something that I legit thought to do. But it wasn't until late January or early February of 2019 that I actually started getting the desire to write a lot. For a bit of a background here, I have been, the concepts and characters that were slowly developing in my head over the past however many decades, they started back when I was almost at the end of elementary school age. I was like in grade 6 or 7, or was it 7 or 8? And, you know, they slowly started developing from then up to now. So a lot of these things have been in my head for quite literally years. And I guess my brain, my head, whatever, finally decided I needed to get them out. So after at least a decade of not being able to write much outside of a little bit of fan fiction and not reading a whole lot, I finally decided to sit down and start writing. Most of what I had written in 2019, I did not keep in its original form at that time. The characters remained, more or less. But the characters were changed a little or repurposed or whatever. I'm glad I started reading books towards the end of 2019 because I'm trying to write a vampire novel, a series of vampire novels, okay? And having not read actual, like, published books in a long time at that point, it was a good thing I did. You know, I read Salem's Lot by Stephen King, I read Fever Dream by George R.R. Martin, you know, I read Dracula by Bram Stoker, and I started my reread of the Vampire Chronicles, right? And it was good that I did, because it helped remind me and what I like about vampires and to recenter it. Because what I was originally writing wasn't what I truthfully envisioned, you know? Like, sometimes we think we might like something a certain way, but then we find out we don't, right? And 2019 was mostly a discovery year for me. Discovery writer. And of course, being primarily a discovery writer, it was necessary for me to do that because I haven't been writing for years and years and years, right? So there was a lot of self-discovery I needed to do, and I did a lot of that, you know, and I made a lot of changes, and there was a lot that developed up in here that I've started putting down on paper. So, like, I wrote a fair bit in 2019, but a lot of it got either junked or repurposed into something better, which I'm very, very proud of so far. And then, of course, it really helps that, you know, my parents have always been supportive of me. My sister's extremely supportive of me. And my husband is also very supportive of me in this. He's very happy that at least one of us is doing what we wanted to do. This is how I figured out that what I really liked about vampires was more the stuff that leaned more towards the horror aspect of them. The fact that they are creatures that don't give a damn about the people they kill. That, to me, is what a vampire should be. None of this paranormal romance nonsense about tortured beings. No, 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 no. I mean, this is... everyone has their own opinion about vampires, but in my opinion, and which will be reflected in what I write, is that you can have vampires that are good characters, that you can sympathize with them, even though they do horrible things, but don't forget that they are vampires. They do kill. That is what they do. And it's not something they feel sorry for. It's not something they feel remorse for. And that, to me, the best vampire books I've read really, really drive that home in a way that is very well done. If you saw my review on Let the Right One In, that's one of those books that I feel had done it really, really well, while still making a character that you can sympathize with, that you can feel emotions for, that you can understand. It doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. You can have the monster, but still have a monster with emotions and a personality and stuff like that. And then, of course, you can have, like what Stephen King did in Salem's Lot, where you can have the monster that's just purely the monster and that's it, right? And then there's the thing that, I mean, everyone struggles with this at some point, but how do you make it different? How do you make it unique? And this is... I feel especially younger writers, the ones that are new, that haven't done as much research, don't have as much writing experience, struggle with this. And I would be lying if I didn't struggle with this at some point myself as well. But, like, ideas are not unique, per se, but it's the implementation of those ideas that can be unique. And it's the same kind of thing as, like, you can't copyright an idea, but you can copyright that implementation of that idea, right? That's why you can have, like, so many different interpretations of zombies and werewolves and vampires and witches and all that sort of stuff. So when I finally understood what exactly it was I wanted to do in terms of writing a vampire novel, in terms of what my goals were, the next goal was to find a way to differentiate it from something that already exists, which, let's be honest, it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, I think a good example of taking something that already exists and repurposing it would be, like, I'll use Stephen King's Salem's Lot again as an example. When you really sit down to think about it, Salem's Lot is just a retelling of the Dracula story. But the ending is different, more or less. It's more modern and the ending is changed. And, well, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in it that's changed, but I like how it's more along the lines of, what if Dracula didn't die? What if they couldn't kill him or didn't kill him or whatever? What would happen, right? So it's technically what Stephen King did in Salem's Lot wasn't unique idea-wise, but his implementation of it was unique for him, and it suited how he writes, what he writes, and so on. I mean, it's the only Stephen King book I've read so far, and I really, really enjoy it, personally. I do think it's one of the better vampire books I've read. And then, of course, I respect Fever Dream by George R.R. Martin, because he has his own interpretation of vampires in there, too, that is very different from what you normally see, right? So you have, it's like almost completely different. You have Salem's Lot, where it's like, it's just Stephen King's version of what you almost always see when it comes to vampires. And then you have George R.R. Martin's Fever Dream, where it's like, I'm going to take the concept of vampires and do something wildly different with it. And I really, really do respect that book for that. There's some things in the book that I'm not too fond of, but I love how Martin's interpretation of vampires was and how unique it was. I can understand why vampires are niche. Those who like it really, really like it, and those who hate it really, really hate it. And then, of course, there are the ones where it's like, oh, vampires have to be this, and they can't be this. Everyone has their preferences. I mean, like I said, I prefer the vampires that are closer to more horror or dark fantasy, but there's a lot of people that prefer the paranormal romance style. And that does really well, especially in young adult, right? But I'm writing an adult horror novel around vampires, okay? So, for me, what I struggled with a little bit was to make a version of a vampire that fulfilled my purpose of... The purpose of the first book that I'm writing here is that you're following the protagonist through her journey as she gradually turns into a vampire, okay? Which is something you don't normally see in fiction. Like, in fiction, it's normally very quick. Like, within minutes or hours or, like, a day or two at the most. But I'm talking about, like, a few weeks to a month type of duration, okay? Which, the way vampires have been interpreted in fiction, usually that's not how it goes. It happens pretty quick. So I had to take that into consideration. And then there was a couple other things I wanted to approach vampires with. So I wanted to have a type of vampire that wields magic, okay? They have a type of magic. It's a hard magic system. It like a lot of fantasy books have, where it's like very specific powers, very specific clear rules that have to be followed, which is purely fantastical. That's where the fantasy aspect comes in. But I wanted the very existence of the vampires to be justifiable by actual real-life science and what we know. Which meant that these vampires couldn't be undead, because, as we know, so far anyways, when something dies, it's dead. It's dead. It stays dead. Except, you know, if you got a necromancer or something, then that's a different thing altogether, but that deals with the whole magic system thing. So, so my vampires couldn't be undead. They couldn't transform rapidly. But they also still had to be fantastical enough to accommodate a hard magic system. So I was pretty thrilled with what I decided on. I was inspired by a couple of science fiction films that I have seen in the past, and not the most appropriate movies to see when you're a child, but, you know, my dad had literally everything on TV at some point or another. So there was this old 1960s science fiction film, I think. What was it? Planet of the Vampires or something like that? Which was interesting, in which I had to look it up because I couldn't remember jack about it. But there was this like parasitic entity that possessed some astronauts that went into space, and these parasites would make their hosts attack and kill each other, and those that survived obviously became vampiric-like beings. So that was very interesting. I vaguely remember the last little bit of that one. And then I was also partially inspired by Alien in a way. So, I'm not gonna delve into it too much more than that, because I don't want to say too much now. It's way too early. I haven't even finished the first draft of my manuscript yet. But that's an idea of what I was aiming for. But I didn't want to make it too sci-fi, right? the science fiction aspect of it is only in justifying their existence. But everything else is, you know, contemporary. It's modern. It's our world as it is now. So it was very interesting trying to figure that out. But I think I did a pretty reasonable job with it. It definitely fulfilled what I wanted and needed out of it. Another hurdle I came across with this was like trying to create a vampire that is really powerful. Like, humans would struggle to kill even one of these creatures. But by the same time, they have few but very severe weaknesses that if they were afflicted with those weaknesses, it could potentially cripple them. And that's one of the things that I have issue with when it comes to some vampire stories, is that there are some in which, you know, especially in paranormal romance, I noticed, where it's like, oh, I'm gonna have this really powerful vampire that's a tortured being and blah 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 blah, and they have all this and that, but they have no real weaknesses that we know of. And it's like, okay, so why don't they take over humanity? Why don't they do this? Why don't they do that? It's a huge loophole that I didn't want in mine. And I know that's not the focus of those stories, but that's the kind of stuff that I think about when I'm reading a vampire book, and not having that really takes out my enjoyment of it quite a bit. So there are some traditional vampire weaknesses that I gave to my vampires, but I have, again, a scientific justification for why they're afflicted by it, right? Which I think, or at least I hope, that people who will eventually read the book will come to respect quite a bit. I don't believe in creating a being as powerful as a vampire without having some very, very clear weaknesses that humans can, in fact, take advantage of if they know how. Because, I mean, what's to stop them from taking over the world and enslaving humanity otherwise, right? So, yeah, and that one was the weakness part was a bit more of a recent development, once I came to that revelation that I had to have something like that with them. Now, in terms of where I am currently with my manuscript, because I'm as of this video, I'm not even half finished with it yet. The idea is to write at least 75,000 words. But it's very likely going to be more than that, probably closer to 90,000, depending. And I know how the first act goes, like the first several chapters of the book, and then I know how the climax and wind down of the book is. So that's the last 5 or 6 chapters. And for this particular draft, what is going to be my actual first draft of the manuscript, I have chapter 1 written out, and I have some of chapter 2, and a large chunk of what is currently going to be chapter 8, but it might move around a little bit. But there was, for the end of the book, the last 6 chapters or so, I had that sitting in my head for quite a long time. I knew what the ending was going to be for months, if not years. And recently, a lot of my brain power was going towards trying to figure out additional details and solidifying it. And it got to the point where, oh my gosh, do you ever have these moments where you feel like there's something bloating your head up in here that you can't really think about much else because there's a lot in here? That's like what I felt like in regards to my ending. So I started skipping ahead and writing that out. So I've written up to about partway through the second last chapter of the book. So currently I think there might be 30 chapters, but I'm not 100% certain. So I'm just treating them as if there's going to be 30 for now. So that would be chapters 25 through 30. All right. So 25 to 28 are done. They're written in for the first draft. That's the way they're going to stay until I'm finished. And then I'm working on 29 right now. So that one should be done probably for the next couple days or so. I'm planning on writing more of that today, the day I'm recording this video, which is the Sunday beforehand. That it's already been very helpful for me to get it out, and you know, I've been able to add more and change some stuff more as a result. Times like this, it's both good and bad to be a discovery writer, because it's like, I have so many wonderful things, but trying to solidify them can be hard. But that's okay. That's okay. It's working out so far. And then the thing I'm trying to keep in mind while writing this stuff as well, which isn't easy as well, is trying to keep the structure of the book in mind at the same time, which I think is part of the reason why I ended up rewriting a lot of what I originally wrote back in 2019, because I was just like writing stuff out without thinking about structure, and it wasn't until after I started thinking about it that I'm like, this is probably not a good thing. But yeah, it's times like this, reading books have been very helpful, and not just the vampire novels I've been reading, but all the other books, like the young adult fantasy, the adult fantasy, all that sort of stuff, from many different authors. I'm one of those people who I can't learn very well via formal education. It doesn't seem to work with how I think, but I'm able to learn partially on a subconscious level from example. So like every time I read a book, that is me learning by example. I'm still reading it as a reader and I love it, but somewhere in the back of my head, I'm still looking at it from a writer's point of view, and I'm going, okay, I like this, I don't like this, blah, 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 blah. Actually, I think that's partially the reason why I'm not quite as far on my writing of the end portion of the book as I probably would be, because I'm also taking breaks to read. And then of course I'm still working a lot right now, right? So trying to separate my home time between my writing and my reading, it's a bit of a juggle. It's a bit of a juggle, but I'm doing what I can. Some days I'm and on top of all that, I'm also still doing research when I'm not reading or writing, like watching YouTube videos from people who have really good pointers and stuff, and looking up articles on the internet involved with writing and publishing and stuff like that. And I will be sharing some of what I've learned by doing that in the near future. Because this is like stuff I'm looking up and researching for myself, right? This is to help me, and I definitely want to impart some of that knowledge onto other people. So I think that's where I'm going to end it, because or else I'm going to ramble a bit too much. I'm sorry if this is all over the place, but I do much better with my off the cuff, just talking what I want to talk about. So yeah. Alright, so this was my writing / reading discussion video, so you can have ideas as to where I'm at. Again, I like to be very transparent about my writing and publishing journey and what I'm doing to make it a reality, so the idea is to have these kinds of videos on a regular basis if I've done a fair bit or whatever. So yeah, thank you for watching this video, and I will talk to you next time. Bye!